Caleb Morgan was seen as a dependable man in a quiet part of Michigan. He worked long hours in logistics and told everyone he believed in loyalty and family. His upcoming wedding to Nora Bell was supposed to be the biggest moment of his life. Friends admired how steady he seemed, and relatives trusted him without question. The wedding date was close, and preparations filled every day with activity. Nora handled most of the planning, while her mother, Denise Bell, stayed closely involved, offering advice and organizing family matters. To outsiders, it looked like a healthy bond between a future son-in-law and a caring mother. What no one realized was that this closeness had crossed a line months earlier. Caleb and Denise shared private meetings under the excuse of wedding errands. These meetings slowly turned into a secret relationship built on manipulation and selfishness. Caleb convinced himself he could keep both lives separate. Denise believed the secret would never come out because of the shame it would bring to her own family. They both underestimated how small mistakes can lead to large consequences. One evening, while sorting documents, Nora came across unfamiliar files connected to her mother's email account that had been left open on a shared computer. The information was clear and undeniable. It showed a pattern that could not be explained away. Nora did not cry or confront anyone. Instead, she felt a sharp clarity replace the shock. She understood that reacting too quickly would only benefit the people who betrayed her. She decided to wait. She copied everything she found and secured it in multiple places. From that moment on, her focus changed. She continued wedding preparations as planned, attended family dinners, and acted calm. Behind that calm surface, she began connecting details that revealed how deep the deception went. Over the next several days, Caleb noticed changes around him that made no sense. A promotion he expected at work was suddenly delayed. Old professional mistakes he thought were forgotten resurfaced. People he relied on became distant without explanation. At the same time, Denise faced unexpected scrutiny from a local committee she worked with, connected to financial decisions she had hidden for years. Both believed these problems were coincidences, but the timing was too precise to be random. Nora had quietly taken legal steps that exposed existing issues without creating new ones. She never spread lies. She only allowed the truth to reach the right places at the right time. Each day brought a new consequence. Caleb's image as a trustworthy man began to collapse. Denise's respected position in the community weakened as investigations moved forward. Neither of them suspected Nora, because she never acted angry or suspicious. As the wedding date approached, tension grew. Guests confirmed attendance, decorations were delivered, and everything appeared normal. Underneath the surface, the structure holding Caleb's life together was breaking apart. He felt trapped but could not identify the source of his downfall. Denise withdrew into silence, overwhelmed by fear of public exposure. 2 days before the ceremony, Nora finalized her decision. She canceled the wedding arrangements quietly and legally, leaving no room for blame to shift onto her. When the truth finally reached the family, it arrived all at once, supported by documents and timelines that could not be denied. The damage was complete before anyone could react. What made the situation unforgettable was not chaos or violence, but control. Nora never raised her voice, never acted out, and never broke the law. She simply allowed consequences to reach those who earned them. By the time Caleb understood what had happened, his future had already changed forever after the wedding was quietly canceled. The town did not receive an explanation right away. People noticed small details first. Vendors were paid off suddenly. The venue calendar was cleared. Social media posts disappeared. Caleb Morgan stayed inside his apartment for days, trying to understand how his life had shifted so quickly. He believed the damage came from bad luck and timing, not realizing someone had been guiding events from the shadows. He spent hours reviewing emails, contracts, and old messages, searching for the moment where everything went wrong. At the same time, Denise Bell faced pressure she had never experienced before. Requests for documents arrived from offices that once trusted her without question. Old records she believed were buried resurfaced. The more she tried to protect herself, the more problems appeared. Every attempt to fix one issue led to another. Her social circle began to shrink. Invitations stopped coming. Friendly calls turned formal and distant. She felt watched, though no one openly accused her of anything. Nora had already left town by then. She did not announce her departure or explain it to neighbors. She moved carefully, staying within legal boundaries, making sure every step was clean and traceable. She transferred her job remotely, changed her address, and limited contact with anyone connected to the situation. To the outside world, it looked like a woman starting fresh after a failed engagement. In reality, she was ensuring she could not be pulled back into the mess she exposed. Caleb's work life continued to fall apart. Internal reviews turned into formal investigations. Contracts he handled were re-examined. Minor violations became major concerns once patterns were noticed. The trust that once protected him was gone. Coworkers avoided eye contact. Management no longer defended him. Each day added weight to his fear, but he still believed he could recover if he stayed quiet and waited it out. Denise made a critical mistake during this period. She attempted to control the situation by contacting people who had already turned away from her. These actions were documented and misunderstood as attempts to interfere. What she saw as self-protection was viewed as guilt. The pressure increased, and her name began circulating in local news discussions, though no details were shared publicly yet. Caleb eventually realized that Nora had not been a passive victim. The precision of the fallout forced him to reconsider her silence. He searched for her, hoping to explain or defend himself, but every attempt failed. Phone numbers were inactive. Emails went unanswered. She had erased herself from his reach completely. That absence became the most frightening part. There was no one to argue with, no one to blame directly. Weeks passed, and the full story reached both families in controlled pieces. Documents, timelines, and verified information were shared privately, but widely enough to destroy trust. No rumors were needed. The truth stood on its own. Relatives chose distance over defense. Support turned into judgment. Caleb found himself isolated, his past actions replayed and re-examined by everyone who once believed in him. Denise lost more than her reputation. She lost her role within her own family. Calls from her daughter never came. Messages were left unread. The silence from those she betrayed carried more weight than any public consequence. She understood too late that the damage was permanent. What neither Caleb nor Denise could change was the method behind their downfall. There was no dramatic exposure, no public confrontation, and no emotional outburst. Everything unfolded quietly, step by step, until escape was impossible. The second chapter of the story was not about discovery, but about consequences moving forward without mercy. Guided by patience and careful planning, to be why the third phase of events, the story had spread beyond the town, though most people still did not know the full details. Caleb Morgan became a subject of quiet discussion in professional circles. Background checks revealed inconsistencies that once would have been overlooked. Opportunities disappeared before he could apply for them. Every attempt to rebuild his career ended the same way, with polite rejection and no explanation. He began to understand that the damage was not temporary. It followed him, invisible but constant. Denise Bell's situation moved faster toward collapse. The investigation into her past decisions expanded, uncovering years of careless record-keeping and misuse of authority. None of it had been dramatic enough to draw attention before, but now everything was examined together. The picture that formed was impossible to defend. Her name was removed from committees and boards where she once held influence. Friends who had relied on her guidance distanced themselves, afraid of being linked to her downfall. Nora, meanwhile, stayed silent. From a different state, she watched events unfold only through verified updates and official records. She did not interfere further. Her work consumed her days, and she avoided places that reminded her of her old life. To those around her, she appeared focused and private. No one knew the full weight of what she had carried or how carefully she had released it. Her control came from restraint, not obsession. As weeks turned into months, Caleb's mental state deteriorated. The loss of reputation affected every part of his life. Financial strain followed professional loss. Bills stacked up. Plans vanished. He replayed past decisions endlessly, searching for a moment where he could have stopped the collapse. Each memory led back to the same truth. The betrayal was the beginning, not the exposure. Denise attempted to present herself as misunderstood, but inconsistencies in her explanations only deepened suspicion. Public sympathy never arrived. Instead, she faced quiet rejection from the community she once influenced. Grocery store encounters became uncomfortable. Familiar faces looked through her rather than at her. Isolation replaced authority. One unexpected twist came when extended family members began uncovering their own losses tied indirectly to Denise's actions. Small financial decisions, delayed approvals, and ignored warnings suddenly made sense. Trust broke in multiple directions at once. The family unit fractured, and reconciliation became impossible. Caleb tried to reach out to distant relatives, hoping for support, but even they had learned enough to keep their distance. His identity as a dependable man had been erased. What remained was a cautionary example, discussed quietly but remembered clearly. He was no longer part of future plans or conversations. Nora's absence continued to confuse people. Some expected her to return, to explain herself, or to demand closure. She did none of those things. The lack of explanation created more impact than any statement could have. Her silence forced others to sit with the truth on their own. By the end of this chapter, the pattern was undeniable. Every consequence had grown from existing flaws, not fabricated accusations. The situation did not rely on revenge in the traditional sense. It relied on timing, patience, and truth being allowed to surface without interference. What shocked observers later was how little effort it appeared to take once the process began. Years of deception collapsed under the weight of documentation and accountability. No confrontation was needed. No dramatic ending occurred. The third chapter marked the point where everyone involved understood that there would be no reset, no forgiveness, and no escape from what had been set in motion. As time moved forward, the situation entered a quieter but more severe stage. The attention surrounding Caleb Morgan and Denise Bell faded from public discussion, but the consequences did not. This was the phase where damage settled into daily life. There were no announcements or updates, only long-term effects that could not be undone. Caleb relocated to a neighboring state, hoping distance would weaken the impact of his past. Instead, the move highlighted how deeply his reputation had been damaged. New environments did not mean new beginnings. Records followed him, and trust did not reset with a change of address. Employment became unstable. Short-term contracts ended early. Promises of advancement dissolved without explanation. Caleb learned that rebuilding required more than time. It required a credibility he no longer had. His savings drained quickly, and the lifestyle he once enjoyed became impossible to maintain. The stress showed in his health. Sleep became irregular, and focus slipped away. The calm confidence people once admired had vanished completely. Denise Bell faced a different kind of punishment. Legal reviews concluded without dramatic charges, but the findings were enough to permanently stain her name. She was barred from positions she once held and lost access to professional networks she had relied on for decades. Financial penalties forced her to sell property and downsize her life. The comfort and respect she built over years disappeared quietly, replaced by isolation and regret. The most painful consequence for Denise was the complete loss of family connection. Holidays passed without contact. Important life events occurred without her presence. The absence was total and intentional. She was no longer part of future plans or memories. The realization that trust, once broken at that level, could never be repaired settled in slowly. Nora remained distant from all of it. She focused on building a new routine, surrounding herself with people who knew nothing about her past. Her career advanced steadily, and her independence strengthened. The experience changed how she approached relationships, but it did not harden her. Instead, it sharpened her awareness. She trusted evidence over promises and consistency over words. One unexpected development occurred when a civil matter connected to Caleb's previous work resurfaced. The case did not involve new wrongdoing, but it relied on past patterns already documented. The outcome further limited his options. Each legal and professional door closed reinforced the same lesson. Consequences do not always arrive loudly. Sometimes they arrive repeatedly, until endurance runs out. Community memory played a quiet role in this chapter. People who once defended Caleb and Denise stopped doing so. The absence of support spoke volumes. Silence became a form of judgment. Even without active criticism, both individuals felt the weight of being remembered for the worst decision of their lives. What made this phase different was the lack of movement. There were no more twists, no sudden revelations. The damage had reached its final shape. Both Caleb and Denise were forced to live inside the results of their actions, day after day, without distraction or escape. By the end of this chapter, the story no longer belonged to public interest or speculation. It became personal, internal, and permanent. The betrayal that started everything was no longer the focus. What mattered now was endurance. The fourth chapter showed that the most brutal part of consequences is not exposure, but continuation. The fifth part of the story unfolded when the last traces of the past finally surfaced in ways no one expected. What had once been private pain turned into lasting consequences that could not be hidden or avoided. Caleb Morgan reached a point where denial was no longer possible. Every attempt to rebuild his identity failed because the foundation was already broken. He was no longer fighting circumstances. He was facing the results of his own choices. A final professional review closed the door on his previous career path completely. The decision was firm and irreversible. There were no appeals left, no explanations that could soften the outcome. This moment marked the end of the life he once planned. The future he imagined with status and security no longer existed. He was forced to accept work far below his former position, not as punishment from others, but as a natural consequence of lost trust. Financial pressure increased steadily. Assets were sold off, one by one. What remained was only enough to survive, not enough to recover. Friends from his past had already moved on, leaving no support system behind. Isolation became routine. Days blurred together, each one reminding him of how quickly everything had collapsed once the truth was allowed to surface. Denise Bell experienced her own breaking point during this period. With professional doors closed and family ties cut completely, she faced a life stripped of identity and purpose. The roles that once defined her were gone. She attempted to reinsert herself into community spaces under different titles, but recognition followed her everywhere. People remembered, not loudly, not cruelly, but clearly enough to keep their distance. The weight of long-term consequences settled in fully. There was no dramatic ending, no moment of forgiveness or redemption. Time did not soften the damage. Instead, it confirmed it. Every quiet morning and empty holiday reinforced the reality that some betrayals do not fade. They remain, shaping every future experience. Nora, far removed from the chaos, continued to build a life that did not depend on the past. She changed cities once more, not out of fear, but out of choice. Her independence became permanent. She no longer followed plans made around other people's expectations. Everything she built was intentional and self-directed. Those who knew her now saw strength, not bitterness. What surprised many later was that Nora never benefited publicly from what happened. There were no interviews, no explanations, and no attempts to control the narrative. Her absence from the story became its most powerful element. Without her presence, Caleb and Denise were left alone with the truth, unable to shift blame or rewrite events. As months passed, the situation stopped being discussed altogether. Silence returned, but it was not peace. It was acceptance. The town moved on, but the consequences stayed exactly where they belonged. Lives continued, just not in the direction anyone expected. The fifth chapter revealed the final stage of accountability. Not exposure, not confrontation, but permanence. What had been done could not be undone, and no amount of regret could reverse the damage. The revenge, if it could be called that, was complete not because it destroyed lives instantly, but because it ensured they could never return to what they once were. That be why the sixth chapter. The full weight of the events had settled into every aspect of life for Caleb Morgan and Denise Bell. There were no dramatic confrontations or public showdowns left. Instead, what remained was a quiet, relentless reminder of choices made and trust broken. Caleb lived each day with the understanding that his reputation, once carefully built, was irreversibly damaged. Attempts to explain himself or justify his actions had failed long ago. Silence had become the only companion that mirrored his isolation. Caleb tried to adjust to life in a smaller town where no one knew him personally. He hoped the distance would offer a fresh start, but old mistakes traveled faster than he imagined. Background checks from prospective employers, casual acquaintances, and neighbors revealed fragments of his past. Even without malicious intent from others, the truth followed him. Trust, he realized, could not be regained with effort alone. Every job application, every casual introduction, carried the weight of decisions made years before, decisions he could not change. Denise Bell, too, faced permanent consequences. The loss of respect, influence, and family connection became her constant reality. Attempts to rebuild her life were met with subtle but unmistakable rejection. Invitations to community events ceased entirely, and old friends avoided contact. Even small, everyday interactions reminded her of the isolation that had grown around her. She lived in quiet tension, aware that the choices she made in secrecy had left her unprotected in the light of truth. Meanwhile, Nora Bell had disappeared from their world entirely. She created a new life that no longer intersected with the people who had betrayed her. Her independence became a shield, and her career flourished without interference from the past. Those who tried to reach her found no response, and her absence amplified the consequences for Caleb and Denise. It was a silent, controlled force that reshaped everything in its path. The most profound part of her strategy was her complete non-engagement. She did not need to act or speak. The results had already been set in motion. Months turned into a year, and the story became a quiet legend among those who remembered it. No one spoke openly, but whispers carried the truth. Caleb and Denise were living examples of the cost of betrayal and secrecy. Their lives were structured around regret and limitation, not excitement or opportunity. Each morning reminded them that recovery was no longer an option. Every interaction was shaped by the consequences they had earned. The final revelation came quietly. It was not about punishment or revenge in the traditional sense, but about inevitability. Every step Nora had taken had been measured and precise. Her plan required patience, restraint, and understanding the long-term effects of truth. It was not about anger or confrontation. It was about allowing natural consequences to unfold systematically. By remaining absent, she guaranteed that Caleb and Denise could never rewrite their story, and no external interference